Welcome to the United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept Book Study, a compensatory counter-racist code. This is the Countering Racism White Supremacy Book Club. Today we will be covering Area 5, Law. Before we get started, would everybody like to go ahead and give their summaries of the chapter?
Excellent. Yes, I would love to just give my quick overview. So this section, this area covers law, which the code says basically is whatever is done is law, but it gets into much more detail than that. So we learned really important terms this area, like the terms race soldier, greater confinement, maximum emergency, or maximum emergency compensatory solitary confinement, which is a really great concept. And we talk about we learned about killing and what should be done with people who kill, with people who think about killing and raping, and yeah, just all in all, law, and not just the kind of law, the fake law we've been taught, but actual the laws about how this universe is ran, which is by racist man and racist woman. So we're gonna definitely dive into that further. But I'll pass it over to Dan.
Okay, and you just need me to point out a certain area that I found interesting.
No, just a little overview, just a summary, what you read, any quick takeaways you want to share really quickly before we dive in deeply to it.
Okay, one of the things I noticed in this area, um, on page 154, compared to everything else we've read so far, is that boxed in area in the middle of the page about what to do if confronted by a race soldier. That's one of the things I took away, or one of the big things in this section. This is the only part in the book that has that boxed off area on page 154.
Yeah, I definitely have that notes for that box later. Thank you. And else like to share a little summary?
Yeah, if I can.
Okay, go. Great.
One of the just quickly the summary of what I've read and what stood out the most was the almost definition of a police officer. I've never known that, so it was it was interesting to read what is the definition of a police officer, and then also what to call them, as 0526 has mentioned, as a law enforcer. But other than that, it continues on about just how to interact with the law, or how to interact with law enforcers, and like what to think about it.
Um, I learned different about law enforcement or enforcement officers and the difference and why we shouldn't call them police officers, as well as people that non-white people that harm other non-white people, as to why they need to be in greater confinement, and how to get yourself out of harm's way, and when being stopped by enforcement officers to basically don't try to be, correct, or try to, you know, kind of fight it, I guess, but just kind of just go by what they're forcing you to abide by.
Mm.
Yeah, for me, Area 5 Law, really understanding the concept of, at least the counter-racist concept of a law and non-laws. In law, the difference between a police officer and a law enforcer, and as well understanding that law is not the same as justice. For me, something that really stood out in this chapter were, the concept of, non-whites or whites killing other people, and kind of the expectations.
Ms. Lewis, would you like to share a little summary of Area 5?
I like to reserve my summary on my closing.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, so it's been mentioned, but it's really important to understand the difference between a police officer and the difference between a law enforcement officer. So you don't want to take a crack at trying to explain the difference or tell me your difference?
I'm a police officer, someone that is doing things within justice of the mistreatment of people and trying to seek justice. And I think a law enforcement is a person that's trying to enforce the law. So they're not even trying to seek for justice. They're just enforcing the law on people.
Yep, exactly. I agree. First of all, police officer is someone who is supposed to be producing justice or maintaining justice. So police officers actually don't exist. We live in a system where people pretend to be police officers, but more times than not, they are just law enforcement officials, which are just people tasked with enforcing whatever the laws the white supremacists want enforced, and they're used to make those laws effective. Like, laws are worthless if race soldiers can't come and enforce them. So this is really why I think it's weird that it's on the police cards it says to protect and serve, because you would assume that they're talking about people, but if I understand race and white supremacy, they're talking about the system of white supremacy, to protect and serve the system of white supremacy, their unjust laws, their non-laws, and the brutality that must be acted against non-whites in order for the system to keep going. So that's what protect and serve means. We don't have police officers. We have law enforcement officials and race soldiers. Add anything?
Yeah, just to add on page 152, I think it's important on this. Read it. According to the compensatory counter-racist logic, it is impossible for a white supremacist to be a police officer, or for a police officer to be a white supremacist. The correct term for a law enforcement officer who practices white supremacy, racism, is a suspected race soldier, suspected racist, or suspected white supremacist. And I think that was really great to read, because it almost like, oh, can a white supremacist be a law enforcement or a law enforcer, or vice versa? So I think it was great to have that distinguished and have it explained here. It's like you're one or the other, and you have to put like suspected race soldier.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to add too. I correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think he ever, puts down what the actual definition of a police officer is. He does go into saying, the two basic goals of correct law enforcement, but he doesn't really say what police officer is. Not that, but I do agree with I guess the definition we came up with here. Somebody that is trying to should enforce justice, but he never he referred to them as correct law enforcement.
On page 152, I believe the code does says what the police are. It says police are people who seek and find truth and who use the truth in such a manner as to produce justice and correctness at all times and in all areas of activity. Racists, however, are people who practice white supremacy. White supremacy is the promotion of falsehood and non-justice and or incorrectness based on factors associated with the color or non-color of people. So I think that's a functioning definition for police officer. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's actually interesting too, because it's kind of like, I guess, the definition of a counter-racist, I guess you could say, is what I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, it's really tragic that the word police has been given such a incorrect association because the police that we see today definitely aren't attempting to produce truth and justice or correctness if evidence and reality in the form of George Floyd's and Breonna Taylor's says anything about that fact.
Oh, I'd like to add, police is in the word guide on page 292.
could you read it for us, Dan?
Okay, for police, page 290, use this word with caution. Use it to apply to any person and or any force that guarantees that no person is mistreated and that guarantees that the person who needs help the most gets the most help. Do not apply the word police to any person who is brutal. Do not apply the word police to any person who is a racist, white supremacist, or a person who is a racist suspected white supremacist. Do not apply the word police to any person who enforces any law in such a manner that justice, balance between people, is not the result. Instead, practice applying the term law enforcement officer to any person who is said to be directly or indirectly assigned to enforce law, including any law that is in effect correct or incorrect. And there's a lot more notes and stuff with it too that continues on to the next page, but page 290.
Thank you, Dan. And I have a question for everyone regarding suspected race soldiers, but it's very important for me to read from 154 first. If anyone, but before I do this, does anyone have any comments that they wanted to add about the word police, police officer law?
I would.
Mm-hmm.
Something that I found very interesting is that I'm looking at law in a whole new light after reading this chapter. Is because many times I've seen non-white people join the police force, right? And I was always confused. Why would they want to do that, realizing that they're going to do harm to other non-white people? But in page 153, he gave me the answer. It says, if a non-white person says that he or she is a police officer, but speaks or acts in a manner that indicates he or she is not a police officer, but a person who is using force to help the suspected race soldier to enforce the practice of white supremacy racism, it is correct to use the term victim of white supremacy. Because I was confused trying to figure, what do you call them? I want to call them a traitor at first, right? But after reading that, then I realized they are victims as well, but yet they are allowing the white supremacists to give them a job where they're being forced to continue to mistreat other non-white people. So I thought that was very interesting.
I thought that was also interesting. I kind of wanted to know why he didn't, say we should refer to them as, fellow law enforcers.
That's a good question. But yeah, I also once have thought of non-whites practicing law enforcement. I almost thought of those people as also traitors, but the code, once we begin to understand racism, white supremacy, and the code, we understand that there's no such thing as no black person, non-white person truly has the power to become a so-called traitor. We all are enticed and subjugated to various degrees of this system. So that's why I'm glad we don't call non-white traitors. That probably will fall into the name-calling category. But definitely important to understand that the brain trashing is very severe. So just because the person is a victim of white supremacy, it doesn't mean that you're incapable of doing us harm. As the record shows, that doesn't matter what color the law enforcement agent is, they're all very dangerous. So this part is extremely important because it may be one of the few boxed sections of the book outside of the area of war, counter war. And it says, the code says on 154, if you are confronted by a suspected race soldier pretending to be a police officer, immediately go into danger mode. Regard yourself as being captured and a completely helpless prisoner of war. Explanation: as a prisoner of war, it is best to act as if you are a soldier captured in greatly fortified enemy territory. If confronted by a suspected race soldier, consider yourself as being captured, because you have been. As a non-white person, and in most situations, you are regarded as a criminal, a dangerous animal, an enemy soldier, an escape convict, a savage, etc. Your existence is in danger. Try to instantly remember that in every tense or hostile situation between you and a suspected race soldier, you most likely will be immediately killed. So this is a great time to share some experiences. Have people here ever been captured by suspected race soldiers? I'm sure we all survived our encounters with suspected race soldiers if you've had them. Nice. I'll start by answering the question first. So does everyone here know what a police raid is? What a raid is?
Yes.
Let's start.
No.
Okay, so a raid or a sting operation is when the police come to your house and basically more armed than usual. They usually will have rifles, assault weapons versus their pistols, and they will usually use equipment like a battering ram, which is a large device that is used to bust open doors. So that's what a police raid is. They usually raid. You can watch a YouTube video on American soldiers raiding various villages, various enemy territories, as they would call them. It's basically kicking down doors and so-called kicking ass is what a raid is. So I myself have been in two police raids where my front door was kicked down by suspected race soldiers. And the first time which I'm not going to talk about right now, was very confusing because, of course, as a prisoner of war, as a child prisoner of war, I didn't know what was happening. But the second time I was in a raid, which is an example of me being captured by race soldiers, I knew exactly what to do because I had already been trained in that. Oh, in this situation, I literally am totally powerless. It's an interesting experience to look a race soldier in the face as he aims a shotgun at you, telling you to get on the floor, put your hands up, all while you're a teenager. But this is what happens in war, things like that. So that was one of my many examples of surviving being captured by race soldiers, and just a prime example of how like I lived in Los Angeles, California, but the war is not in some faraway land if you're black. The war is right at home, 24/7, especially if you're black, all the time for non-white people. But anyone can share experience with a suspected race soldier, or we can
I have an experience. This was probably like the last time it happened, probably when my daughter was a baby, and my brother was on probation at the time, and so the police would do like they called it like random searches or whatever. And they did it one time, and then the second time my brother told his parole officer, and she was like, they're not even supposed to do that because supposedly the parole officer allows them to go and search the place of the person. But she said they're not even supposed to do that. I didn't even allow them to do that. You know, whatever. So eventually, this is probably like a day before he got out of parole, or 2 days before he got off parole, and they came. But when my sister opened the door, they came with guns drawn. So she ain't had no choice but to open the door. And they searched, and of course they didn't find nothing. The third time they came, and it was like summer, and I was like, well, don't you guys supposed to have a search warrant? Like, they just can't come up in here and just want to search things. And they were like, no, like, to just insult me to know, like, I don't know no better. Hey, Mom. So they did that. I guess he just got so fed up because obviously they weren't listening, or they were just trying to find something that, they couldn't find. So that he finally was off parole. He put the paper on the door so they wouldn't even try to like come in. But yeah, the entitlement they have is just beyond ridiculous.
Wait, Carice, were you done? I don't know what just happened.
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay. Wow, I think that's a great example of how even when we have laws so-called meant to protect us and cops so-called needing warrants, that has never stopped white supremacists from knocking down any doors or killing any non-white person they wanted to, as far as I can recall. I see Ms. Williams has a hand raised.
Yes, I hadn't really thought about this until y'all started talking about this, but I have a horror story with a raid as well. I was living in this apartment complex, and some of my son's teenage friends had got into a little disagreement with some other guys at school, and they knew where they lived, so they went to the apartment complex, and they called themselves going to fight them or whatever, but somebody had a gun. And when the guy shot, the postal carrier was there, right? So the postal carrier got wounded. He didn't die or nothing, but he did get wounded. So my son, when he got home, he told me about the incident, and I'm thinking, okay, well, everything okay, right? Shoot, about they had already been in the neighborhood trying to figure out who were the guys, right? And who was all involved and who had the firearm, right? So they couldn't figure it out. So I think about maybe 4 or 4:30 in the morning, we all sleep. Bam, with the battering ram. And I'm thinking, like, what the heck? I'm thinking somebody, I had already heard the noise of somebody coming up the stairs, but I'm just thinking that's somebody just clowning around, right? And then bam, the door flew open. But I'm in my bedroom. Before I could even put on a robe or anything, they were in there and they had masks all on and everything. And I'm like, what the what? And they said, we're looking for, and they said my son's name, right? And they went to his room, but everybody had to just freeze, right? And I mean, it was about, I guess about 7 of them, but they all were masked. But they took my son with them. Now, my son was not the one with the gun, nor did he shoot at the postal carrier or anything like that. But because he was with the guy who did, right, they had to take them all in. And of course, they finally found out who the guy was who did the firing of the gun. But they kept my son, and they found a reason why they could charge him with something else, and it was related to some other little situation where somebody had filed charges on him, and he didn't even know, right? But anyway, when they come for you, they ain't trying to let you go. They want somebody. And if you got anything on you, they're gonna try to make sure that they find a way to charge you where you won't be out on the street. So that was my incident. But I'm telling you, I had never experienced anything so terrified. But nobody got hurt. So, but it just made me remember that. That's all.
I personally don't have too many, or really any. There was a time when I was a child, an incident that happened. Uh, I was at the store with my family. It was just me, my mom, and my brother at the time, and my my mom exhibits mental health issues sometimes at that moment in time. So I think she may have not been, I don't know exactly what was going on, but because I was so young at the time, all I remember is we were leaving the store and numerous cop cars, just so many police officers were everywhere in the parking lot. They were ripping me away from my mom, and after that, it was pretty much a blur. Other than that, most of my teen years and stuff, I just got it. Most of the encounters I came in with the law enforcement were just incidents of me smoking pot and getting caught on the streets. So that's it. That's pretty much my encounters with law enforcement.
Yeah, I think that's really tragic that 2 people here have stories of race soldiers taking their mother away when they're a child. And Miss Williams, your story was that's just so typical of racist man, racist woman. They just want to fill up the sardine house, which is greater confinement. They just want to pack it in, and I think the younger the better. So that's just really a scary situation. I hope you that your son is maintaining.
No, he's not maintaining, but something else I forgot.
Mm-hmm.
When they did that raid on my house,
Mm-hmm.
on my apartment, they also hit 4 other apartments in the same complex. So it was, I remember I told you they all were schoolmates, right? So they found out who all the guys were. And the one they were looking for, they still didn't get him till later. And his girlfriend was the one who told him to go ahead and because they had come to his girlfriend's house, thought he was there, right? And they finally caught him, and he went to prison. I don't know how many years he went to prison, but they finally caught him simply because that was assault on a postal carrier, which was a federal worker. Even though the guy wasn't trying to shoot the postal carrier, he was really trying to scare the guy who was bullying him, right? And by doing the firearm and the postal carrier being there, and then him being wounded, right? He threw away, I bet at least 10 years of his life. So very tragic.
Damn.
All teenagers.
Yeah, that's, and like if it was a racist white child, they definitely would not have done a fraction of that. But this is why this section, I'm gonna read it later, but the section says it's really, really important for non-white people to not end up in greater confinement.
Exactly.
So I want to ask a question because we just heard all these horrifying experiences, to say the least. So what should victims of white supremacy do in this time of war? This time of war being waged against us, and the code says gives us some suggestions on page 154. It says suggestions. If confronted by a suspected race soldier, do not do anything to make that officer believe that you will not comply. Everything that you say should be yes, sir, or yes, ma'am, or no, sir, or no, ma'am. Always do what you are told to do. If you are told to put your hands up, put your hands up. If you are told to get on the ground, get on the ground. Do not argue, resist, name call, or talk about your rights. You may explain that later. Do not make any quick moves or give reason to believe you are being aggressive or not complying. Be courteous and do your best to be cooperative. Avoid doing or saying anything that will give them an excuse to legally do bodily harm to you. Keep in mind that during the existence of white supremacy, any white person who is able to be a racist white supremacist probably is one. So don't fight. Well, so yeah, this is from the book, and I've also heard Miss Neely Fuller say, "Don't fight, don't fuss, don't flee." Could be life saving tips.
Yeah, that was something important because I feel that in the past, I brought this up to the attention of like other non-white people, especially when it comes to the recent recordings that always come out of race soldiers taking the lives of non-white people. What I often see that I often see fellow victims kind of acting in ill ways that just don't make any sense. I see them often yelling or running away. Not it it's case by case, but definitely I want to bring up one in particular. I don't remember if Jacob Blake, but when he was getting shot in the back, and as he was walking away from that race soldier and just getting shot in the back, I just thought I just kept thinking to myself, why is he just why is he walking away? Why is he not complying? Why isn't he listening? It's like given the climate and the system that we're under, and these recordings are coming out almost monthly, sometimes weekly. It's I don't understand why victims keep acting in that kind of way. It doesn't really
I
make sense.
can say some victims are scared, and then some victims don't know the gist of the situation. They don't know the gist of the system. So some victims are not, some are ignorant and some are fearful.
Yeah, I would say like 99.9% of victims of racism and white supremacy are not aware of racism, what it is, and how it works. This is why we can find people talking just talking nonsense to the police. Like, I'll give an example. Before I was on code, let's say last year, no, the year before last, when I was still living in at my auntie's apartment, she had called the race soldiers on my cousin, and I was not that aware of racism and white supremacy, but I was aware of the fact that so-called black families shouldn't be calling the police on one another. So when the cops get there, I was yelling at my aunt, like, you called the ops on your daughter? Are you stupid? Why would you call the ops? Why would you call the murderers on your daughter? And I was yelling pretty crazily and pretty angry. And the cops were like, the race soldiers were like, "Hey, come down here for a second." And of course, I didn't listen. I went back in the house because I'm not gonna walk over to a group of cops who I was just cursing out, But had I been on code, I would have acted differently. But a very dangerous moment right there. I could have walked over there and then got placed in greater confinement. So it's really important to know and understand that racist man and racist woman, they will love to put a new girl like myself or anyone in here in this chat into greater confinement. So I think these suggestions are life-saving and time-saving if we don't want to end up in greater confinement or dead.
Yeah. I wanted to read this on 155, where it says, "Know and understand that as such, he or she is capable of doing great harm to you, and that he or she has the greater advantage. Any move that you make just may be your last. Speak and act as if you know this. Do not pretend that you have power in this situation that logic tells you that you do not have. Do not mistakenly believe that you can exercise your rights or show your so-called power by not cooperating." And then I highlighted the next part, which is, "You are going to lose. The record shows that." So, all you guys' suggestions are, thank you for them. But I just wanted to add as well that, still given all the recordings and all and such, just it doesn't make it logical sense to me. Still, why people just
Yep. And that's what's really important to understand, that this is a war that we were born into, that white people have started. So if I am personally ever engaging with a race soldier, I have no problem saying, "Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Whatever to do to keep from being put in the ground when I don't plan to be put in the ground this soon." So unless a person is planning on ending up in the ground by race soldiers, very important to understand how to engage with them. This part right here, Ms. Williams, you have something to add?
Yes. On the greater confinement,
Mm-hmm.
the last two paragraphs of the page, it says, "Too many victims of racism spend too much time and energy in greater confinement. Too many jails, prisons, concentration camps, etc., are established for the basic purpose of warehousing non-white people, including many of the unborn. The white supremacists know that a world system based on racism and white supremacy requires substantial numbers of non-white people to be greatly restricted in their movement from place to place." And as I was reading that, it dawned on me, okay, I'm in the state of Texas. I said, okay, well, let me just see how many prisons are in Texas. Okay. When I did my research, I went to a site, dfwparole.com, and it's a site of a lawyer. But anyway, he gives prison location and parole resources, right? And he states in there that over 200,000 yearly are incarcerated. And he was talking about in Texas, basically, but other states as well. But then he goes on to give facts that Texas has 52 men prisons, 5 women prisons, 16 jails for men, and I think it's 3 for women, 3 work camps, 5 medical sites, and just goes on to just give you the various ways that they're warehousing these people. So if everybody thinks that they're all just in prison, no, they're in other places as well. And he went on to state the facts, and basically these stats were based between 2015 and 2017. And he says that 8 states, Alaska, California, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Vermont, these states, it costs the state $50,000 a year for each one of those people. In the state of Texas, it's up to $31,000 as of 2017. And then he talked about in the state of Texas, because of the pandemic, they're having to close at least 2 of the prisons temporarily because of the pandemic. But it just goes to show you it's big money in these prisons and warehousing non-white people. So either we got to get the message to realize that they're making money off our greater confinement simply because we will not follow the rules. And when we refuse to follow the rules, they want to lock us up and make money off us. Then I remember talking to someone the other day about the fact when they're warehousing these people, they have them working for companies who send their products to the prison for them to manufacture and make. But the minute they get out of prison, they can't even get a job for these companies. So I just wanted to let you realize that whatever state you're in, you might want to look at the numbers to see what's really going on. And I think that Texas is probably, well, I'm not going to say it's the worst state because it may be, but it's just that it just shocked me to realize how many prisons were in Texas. It just shocked me because I had no idea. But it's just something to think about. That's all.
Yeah, this is America. This, the concept of America has, I'm sure, the most prisons in any so-called first world country. So I'm not surprised. And Kendrick Lamar has a song, I believe it's called Poetic Justice, where the line says, I used to want to see the penitentiary, thought it was cool to look the judge in the eye as he sentenced me. So this could be decoded as young Black males in particular are trained and programmed to gravitate towards greater confinement, whether consciously or subconsciously. Because even when I was younger, I remember just being like in my single digits, being under 10 years old, going to the candy house, getting some candy, and then thinking that it was cool to go to jail, to end up in prison, to get my strikes. So when I was a kid, I definitely thought going to prison was cool. I definitely saw myself eventually going to prison for doing something cool, like mistreating another non-white person or beating them up or robbing something cool. And when I was very confused, robbing, stealing, manipulating people, it was cool to me. It was fun. This is what happens when you are raised off white supremacy culture. And now that I'm much more less confused, I'd rather die than go to jail because I understand jail to be just slavery refined. Because that's what a prisoner is. It's just like a different way of saying this person is a legal slave. We have the right to mistreat and have this person work as a slave. Whereas when am outside of the greater confinement, yes, I'm still a slave to the system of white supremacy, but I'm not confined as harshly as people who are in greater confinement. And I think this part is extremely important from 156, where he says, the code says, know and understand that racist man and racist woman, white supremacists, collectively enjoy knowing that white people are traditionally and routinely and in large numbers confined to cages or reservations similar to those of despised or enslaved animals or selected pets. They seem to associate dark-skinned, non-white people with creatures or things that are suitable for cages, crypts, coops, chains, cuffs, ropes, shackles, stalls, yokes, and all forms of acute and harsh ghettoization. Non-white people have been directly or indirectly trained to spend much of their existence in a condition of restriction of movement according to the desires, dictates, and plans of the white supremacists of the known universe. Knowing and understanding this to be true, it is best and correct for all non-white people to avoid doing or saying anything that they believe will result in unnecessary or non-constructive restrictions on their ability to move about at will. The racists make certain that substantial numbers of non-white people exist under conditions that will likely cause them to do things that will give the racists an excuse to put them in confinement. The racists cause this by using a variety of tactics, many of them through many of them based on deception through pretension. Examples pertaining to provide economic progress while working to hinder it. Pretending to provide educational progress while working to hinder it. Pretending to produce justice while working to continue and refine the practice of injustice. Really important piece of code. Even when I was a young kid, I was like, everyone's always talking about justice, but nothing ever gets better. Everyone's talking about, all the crime is going down, but nothing ever gets better around here, in particular. Had I known that it's because of the system of white supremacy, I wouldn't have wasted so much time thinking that way and gotten serious about this problem much earlier in my life.
Yes. Speaking of, this the concept of greater confinement, it's really kind of exposed the falsehoods of, greater confinement to me, just hearing this, Miss Williams and everybody here to speak about it. Jail and prison is, oftentimes, but I mean, we know this, but oftentimes it's supposed to be considered a rehab, right? You go to these white countries, I don't know, Norway or something, and they're like these people go in there and they're rehabbed to come back into society. But we've known for a long time that that's not the case with the system here. So I find that to be very interesting. And also when you're reading that part off, one part stuck out to me where it was on the same page 156, the second paragraph, where he says non-white people have been directly or indirectly trained to spend much of their existence in a condition of restriction of movement according to the desires, dictates, and plans of the white supremacists of the known universe. So that whole idea of being trained to exist in a condition of restriction of movement, that part really stuck out to me. I don't know why, but I don't want it. When I was, more confused, this part, that show Insecure came up, and that girl Molly, how she was talking about how she never went to the beach, even though she lived in LA. That's what was kind of like screaming out to me. This idea that non-white people aren't able to really think or outside of their immediate environment they've been trained to, stay where they're at. And being trained, kind of reminds me of how like we stay in the house all day and we don't ever leave, kind of just being in our cozy little prison cell, I that part to me, is very interesting, and thank you for reading that again. Really got me thinking about how non-white people are trained to exist in a condition of restriction of movement. Because when you really think about it, a lot of us don't I don't know if it's lack of imagination or what you want to call it, but we don't know much or nor have a desire to know much about like anything outside of our immediate environment.
Yeah, that's correct.
Oh, I'd like to add something on that restricted movement. That reminds me of back in Area 4, that dislocation and stuff. Like we're stuck in our so-called hoods. I know, like me, I haven't been to many places, and it might be the case for some people here. You haven't been outside your state. You haven't been to any other states. Like they do a good job of making sure that you can't move or go anywhere. Um, and then one other thing about the greater confinement, I think this was back in Area 2 education, and it said something about like the only smart people in prison or greater confinement are the people that plan to be there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that reminds me of like, when you're in the hood, and when I think of restrictions, you can't go to this hood because of the colors you're wearing or just the territory of it. So you kind of just gotta stay where or go somewhere that isn't restricted because of the things that you're wearing or the colors that you're wearing.
Mm-hmm. And I think this training could also manifest in like the porch. Black people love to spend a lot of time on the porch, just doing much of nothing. At least that's what I saw in the hood from my victim unit. And I know why. Oh, this is how we've been trained. I don't even go outside as much as I should. And it's because of part of my training. I have learned consciously or subconsciously that the outside world is dangerous for me as a Black male. So I must minimize contact to preserve my well-being. Preserve my being. Very little about being a Black male, but so to preserve my being. Yeah, this is really really deep.
Oh, I have another thing I'd actually like to add too. Since we're on the restricted movement and whatnot, this is something I saw in the 1984 edition. This is on page 95 of the 1984 edition. It says, do not blame any place or anything for practicing racism and or for committing any unjust act. Blame only persons. And then it goes on for reasons and explanations. It is not possible for places or things to commit unjust acts. Only people can commit unjust acts. People sometimes say that a particular place is racist and or that a person was mistreated by a particular town or city or country. People will sometimes say or imply that they were treated badly by the United States. They will sometimes say that Russia practices racism or that Mississippi is racist. People will sometimes say that a particular automobile plant does not do justice. Remarks of this type are never correct. Places and or things should never be identified as being racist or unjust. Only a person can practice racism. Only a person can practice injustice. And I think with that restricted movement, like some, Black people are victims, they won't go to a certain state or city because, like it said in that example, Mississippi is racist. And they're associating racism with a place and not the people in that place.
Yeah, I have a bad habit of that. I'm like like as much as I would like to go down south, I have like the biggest fear of going down south because I'm thinking of just the place, but as the sense of just like the people.
Yeah, I've also had
And I'm looking at the way Dan is looking at it as opposed to just the people, because every state has tacky people, so, or racist people. So, yeah, that makes more sense to see it in that light.
yeah, it's very thanks for that, Dad. It's very logical. And it makes me understand when I very much like Carice, I did not when I was a little kid, I didn't even know the term white supremacy. I was afraid of the South. And I didn't know too much about lynchings or any of that stuff. I was just afraid of the South because somewhere deep in my brain computer or somewhere deep in from my ancestral line, my body and soul knows what has happened in the South. But it's not the South committing the injustice, not the South lynching and hanging people. It's white people chopping off male genitalia, black male genitalia, taking it home in jars. It's white people hanging black people from trees who happen to live in the South. So it's really important to like name things correctly and describe things correctly. So thanks for that, down. Really important. Hope we all begin to practice that and not calling places or things racist, but white people who are the only people who can be racist. So a question I have for everyone is in a system of white supremacy, what should be the only reason a non-white person ends up in greater confinement according to the code?
According to the code, for making a compensatory investment request. I understand that correctly.
Anyone else like to care to answer?
What Kwaku said on the compensatory investment request.
Yeah, exactly. Which is simply asking for what should be on planet Earth, which is justice, balance between people, and guaranteeing no one is to be mistreated, and those who need the most help receive the most help. But it is really unfortunate that he knows to add this part, and it says from 157, the person who chooses to make a compensatory investment request must be prepared to suffer ridicule, greater deprivation, and possibly death because of doing so. So in the system of white supremacy, asking for help, asking for justice is a very, very dangerous thing, as Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and the many others can show.
I kind of wanted to understand, because I was having trouble with the universal compensatory investment request, where he says on page 157, a universal compensatory investment request applies to every non-white person in the known universe who, because of the harmful effects of white supremacy, racism, is not adequately able to constructively help himself or herself. It's incorrect to make a universal compensatory investment request if the person making the request has the ability, mental and physical, to do the constructive work that will result in his or her receiving the constructive help that he or she needs. I'm not going to read the rest, but so I was having trouble. So is it correct for non-white people to make universal compensatory investment requests?
Yeah, I would say it's always correct.
So when he says the person making the ability, or the person making the request has the ability, mental and physical, to do the constructive work. That's the part I don't understand.
I think a good example is that if I'm making a compensatory investment request, and I'm asking for money to get food, that's not really constructive because I already have money to get food. Whereas I don't have money to get justice, nor do I think there is any amount of money I can receive to get justice. So I think it's all about don't make compensatory investment requests for things you don't need. Like, does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think that's what it's attempting to say. Someone can also add to it if they have any more ideas on what it's trying to say, what the code is saying.
Because I mean, I wouldn't say, I may have the mental. I don't know if maybe I'm just, I would consider I have the mental and physical ability to do some constructive work, but and a lot of times I don't have the means of producing justice. So that's why I um, I understand compensatory investment requests. Asking for what should be given or what you should have to make a constructive result. To have a constructive result. It's a little confusing.
Yeah, and I think the universal compensatory investment request is also helps us to understand that no non-white person has the ability to do what needs to be done, which is replacing white supremacy with justice. So I think not only is the universal compensatory investment request like a necessity, it's a duty because even if all non-white people get together and they're all on code, they still need a compensatory investment from white people to actually produce justice. Unless we're just assuming that we're gonna get justice without asking for it, without requesting it in affected numbers, which is not gonna be the case.
I wanted to ask, and I hope some people have some answers for me. I wanted to ask a question, kind of going back to 156, where at the, right above the examples where he says, the racists caused this by using a variety of tactics, many of them based on deception through pretension. So I wanted to kind of get some examples of these, like pretending to provide economic progress while working to hinder it, pretending to provide educational progress while working to hinder it, pretending to produce justice while working to continue and refine the practice of injustice. Um, I was hoping, we could come identify some of these if we did. I think particularly in education, I think often there's like the quality of education. The quality of education isn't good, yet they are always talking about how kids need to be educated, but the quality of education isn't good. Therefore, I don't think any progress is being made. Am I kind of making sense?
Yeah, I'll give an example of the pretending to provide educational progress. Take for example the concept school to prison pipeline. Well, how is this manifested? Well, it certainly could it be that having so-called school police, having a person with a badge and a gun in a classroom. Perhaps think about the clip of the black female child being slammed in the classroom floor by the race soldier, acting as a so-called school police. So this is how they can pretend to be like, hey, we need school police to make education better, to make things more manageable. but you have a race soldier in the classrooms now who I suspect to just make the children uncomfortable, because in a system of white supremacy, most Black people are uncomfortable around race soldiers automatically. And B, to refine the system of white supremacy. If you are criminalizing children, brutalizing children, then there's only so many ways that they can grow up. If you're treating someone like an animal constantly while they're young, it's hard for that person not to grow up to be an animal. If that makes sense.
Yes, that does. On economic progress, it makes me think about loans. A lot of, in particular, individuals and countries are given these large loans to help them. I was watching a documentary on Haiti, where and this pertains to a lot of underdeveloped countries, African countries, South American countries, but they are given loans to progress economically, but then the loans accrue so much interest that over time that these countries are unable to pay it back. So I think that they're pretending to provide economic progress while also working to hinder it. So those countries, a lot of times, and individuals, even us as non-white people, we end up in debt, and we are unable to pay back that money.
Yeah.
One of those areas, one of the things that I think about for economics would be like just the welfare system and different things that they so-called provide to produce justice. I think it continues to perpetuate the cycle of like to refine white supremacy, because I say that because of like what is required in order to receive benefits, quote unquote, is just like unrealistic, I mean, not unrealistic, it's realistic in a way that you almost have to stay in a certain like living situation in order to receive help from the white supremacists. So I think that's another way that they utilize like their resources in order to perpetuate this cycle of like white supremacy. Like, oh, I will give you X amount of benefits if you don't have a Black man in the household, or only if you make under $20,000 a year, or I can only give you these benefits if you are a single mom struggling on X, Y, and Z, and I think that's a way for them to just keep you almost in that cycle, because it almost feels good. It's like, you almost think like, oh, this is free money, but in reality, it's like, yes, it might be free money, quote unquote, but it's only to keep you into that like category they want you to stay in.
Yeah, good example now, y'all. We also learn about how that tactic from the ISIS papers is used to keep the Black male and the Black female separated and without each other, in order to make it easier for a racist man and racist woman to dominate non-white people. I want to give another example for pretending to produce justice. For example, we just got that new George Floyd bill. Now, unless this bill is going to prevent people from being mistreated from race soldiers, then the bill is pretending to produce justice while actually hindering it. So there's many ways white people do pretend. But yeah. Yes, Ms. Williams, like to add something?
I was thinking about, I think that was Corey speaking, was it? Before you?
That was Nana Yala.
Oh, Naya. Okay, I was thinking about what she was saying about the economic side of the non-white women in their homes. From what I have seen, about that system is that what it does, now I understand the code that we're not supposed to lie and we're supposed to be truthful and honest. And that is what we should be doing. But for what I have seen with the system, when it comes to economics and their so-called help to the non-white people, is that it's a lie. It's a constant lie you have to tell to be able to get those benefits. It's not free. It's a lie they're paying you to continue that lie you tell. They know you're lying about that. They ask you, okay, when last time you seen the baby dad? Come on. You ain't no nun now. But they want you to lie and say, okay, I haven't seen him in 5 years. And I don't know where he is. All this stuff, they make you lie to get those benefits. And you shouldn't have to lie. You shouldn't have to not be less than a female having a desire for a man, but they push you to keep telling lies after lies after lies. And then when you go down there, then they say, okay, well, last time you were here, you said this. And you say, oh, well, now I meant this. You know what I'm saying? But that's what I have seen. It's a system that rewards you for constantly telling them lies to keep giving money. And most mothers, I'm one, you want to feed your children, you don't have the resources to do it, you will do what you have to do to make sure your children are fed and a roof is over your head, even if it comes to you lying. And it should not be that way. If it was a just system, you needed help, they would just give you help. You would not even have to tell a lie. So that's the unjust side that I see, because I see countless of women, even today, still lying, and then having to keep up with those lies that they told. Sometimes they just got to write the lie down. So the next time they go see the people, they remember the lie they told. And it's shameful. It's absolutely shameful that people are put in those type of positions to continually lie when they really should not have to do that. If the system was just and correct, they would just give them the help that's needed. That's guaranteed. That no one is being mistreated, and those that need help get the help that's needed. It's the most constructive help. That's all.
Yeah, I would like to add with that. As far as food stamps, quote unquote free, but the cash is definitely not free. Eventually, down the line, if you want to buy something like a house, you have to pay that back. So you're just building up like a loan collection with them anyway.
Oh, I'd like to add something to this too. This is also in the 1984 edition, those examples that Mr. Fuller gives. And I would think, as far as like examples for those, I would think kind of a bit like racial showcasing, because, they always have these articles, at least like once a month, where for like the economic progress one, they'll showcase a black person that's quote unquote doing good or out there winning. And then, that ain't the case for most of us. And then the educational progress one, one example or an article that comes to mind, I know there was like a recent thing with Google. They were doing like some sort of technology initiative that was specifically for black females. So this will help, black females get ahead, and it's going to hinder the black male. And then as far as the last one, pretending to promote justice, with all the, executions, police brutality, don't use that term, it's in the word guide, executions. You'll get like one case where there will be so-called justice or like a payout to the family or attempted family, and then there'll be like 10 hashtags that take place right after that. So that would be continuing refining the practice of injustice. So you get one case with a payout, and then you get 10 hashtags in the same month. So those would be my examples.
Dang. So, Ms. Williams, you brought something to mind with what you shared. You know how Neely Fuller says when you ask how he's doing, he tries to answer honestly by saying still learning. I think if you were to ask a white supremacist how they were doing, and they were to give an honest answer, they should say still lying, because the system is operated through deceit, lies, and
Exactly.
confusion.
Still lying.
Still lying, exactly. Uh, yeah. Well, is there any more bits to share before we okay, I don't think so. So I'm just gonna ask the next question. So what is when is it correct to suggest a person to be killed? So is it ever correct to suggest a person should be killed? Anyone want to answer the question?
From what I got, please correct me if I'm wrong. Read it a while ago. You shouldn't suggest another non-white person should be killed. But from what I read about in the murder section is that if a non-white person, like if anyone like murders someone, they should sit in a like confinement and have the time to like murder themselves. Is that what I read? Did I read that incorrectly?
Yeah,
Or is that a different section?
No, yeah, that's definitely in this section where the code suggests that those who kill people should be placed in a solitary confinement with a object similar to what was used for the killing, and given the opportunity to kill themselves or to wait until there's a system of justice. So my answer to the question is, when is it correct for to suggest a person to be killed, is that we should only if a person is if my associate Fred goes out and kills someone, and they come into my house and tell me they did it, I would suggest Fred. I think you should. I think probably the best thing for you to do is kill yourself. And I think that's the only time to suggest a person to be killed is only if they have done a killing of their own. If you want to practice controversies code, I think it makes sense. If you're gonna kill somebody, you should be willing to kill yourself as well. Does that make sense for everyone?
If you're bold enough to do it to somebody else, so I guess like that shows you don't have a conscience, then you're bold enough to do it to yourself. Because now you just defeating the whole purpose. You don't have purpose in life because you're just refining the system of killing your own non-white victims as well.
And one thing to add too that I read in that section, thank you, Carissa in 0526, is that it has to be an intentional killing that you do, because like sometimes, like say you're on the road and there's an accident happens and you don't intend or intentionally want to kill someone, and I think it's important to like have that distinguished. So it's like if you intentionally kill someone, then that is what the protocol should be after.
Yeah, and just to hear if they from the code on 158, here's the answer. Portion of the answer. Question: what is the correct thing to say that should be done with a person who willfully, deliberately, maliciously, and unjustly kills any person? Answer: such person should be put in maximum emergency compensatory solitary confinement and kept there with the same or similar tool, weapon, or substance that he or she used to kill that person until he or she decides to use that tool, weapon, or substance to kill him or herself, or until there is an end to all killing of persons by persons every place in the known universe. Note: Compensatory constructive isolation means an almost total isolation from people or creatures, except to be given very carefully chosen reading or study materials that are of constructive value. All time use should be of constructive value and preparation for a constructive future. The aforementioned suggestion is correct when advocated and supported according to the concept and practice of compensatory law and should be applied to all people. Those persons who are opposed to the aforementioned maximum emergency compensatory solitary confinement concept should be opposed to anyone, my bad, should not be opposed to anyone, including himself or herself being the next person who is unjustly killed. So I really like this question because when people hear information like this, they're like, "Oh, that's crazy. I'm not gonna put every person who kills somebody and away forever or make them kill themselves. That's crazy." Okay, well, if that's the logic you want to use, then you should have no problem if you are the next person to be involved in a Las Vegas nightclub shooting, school shooting, a bombing on an FBI building, 9/11 attack, any death that occurs that you are involved in, you should have no problem with it because I believe maximum emergency compensatory confinement would do a lot to prevent the current insanity that we see on planet Earth, which is massive amounts of killing, death, rape, and death on planet Earth. So if you and I keep in mind, I was a person who thought being a serial killer was fun and cool, you know. But this just goes to show you how the system of white supremacy really makes us monsters and monstrosities. And I believe the average non-white person is a clear example of that.
Yeah, when I first heard this when I was listening to one of the recordings for the show, and when Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. was talking about it, and when he was talking about it, I just was like, wow, this guy is insane. This is crazy to put somebody in a room. Like if you killed somebody, you put him in a room with that weapon. The way he was describing it, being on their system, I was laughing, but reading about it and really understanding, how he says, he says it in the book, you should stand by your work, or that person should stand by their work. And I think it, according to logic, it makes a lot of sense. I think that should be the only, thing that happens when somebody commits a crime like not a crime, commits an atrocity. I don't know the codified way of saying it. Trying to be codified, but when somebody does something like that, I think that's the appropriate punishment. And to go back to the question, I think that nobody should be executed. But if you kill somebody, you should be held in greater emergency, compensatory confinement with the weapon that you killed that person with.
Yeah, and you mentioned a really important concept, which is stand by your work, and it can be understood as from 161, where the code says, according to compensatory logic, any person who is bold enough and or uncaring enough to willfully, deliberately, and unjustly kill another person should be bold enough and uncaring enough to willfully, deliberately, and efficiently kill himself or herself. It is correct to always be willing to stand by your word, whether it's killing someone, raping someone, stealing from them, or mistreating someone. No matter what we're doing, good or just, unjust, constructive or non-constructive, we should be willing to stand by it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I got a question. But what if like this person is really trying to get you and it's either killed or be killed? Do you just get killed and die with, dignity, or, kind of defend yourself?
Oh,
Uh,
go ahead, Dan.
yeah, I was gonna say for that one, in the word guide, page 188, justifiable homicide. I don't know if this is later, in like probably like area 9, but I think the answer to Carice's question would be that right there. Justifiable homicide. Use this term with caution. Study the ways that others use the term. Ask questions. The questions for this are, is it justifiable to kill someone in self-defense? Is it justifiable to kill a person who is trying to rob you? Is war a reason to kill people? Is war justifiable? If so, according to whom? Who is qualified to make war? Who is qualified to make counter war? Is it justifiable homicide for a victim of racism, non-white person to kill a racist white supremacist? If so, why? If not, why not? During the existence of white supremacy racism, which white persons are correctly qualified to decide what is or what is not justifiable homicide? In matters that involve non-white people, which white persons have proven that they are not white supremacist racists. Is it ever correct for a white supremacist racist to decide what is or what is not justifiable homicide? So hopefully that answers the question.
Yes.
Oh, one other thing I'd like to add too is from the 1984 edition, and this is on page 94. Um, it says, never hire, force, or order any person to kill or maim a person. Never allow any person to hire, force, or order you to kill or maim a person. Kill only those persons that you know should be killed and who should be killed by you in order to promote justice. Reason, explanation. It is non-just and incorrect for any person to hire, force, and or order any person to kill or maim a person. So maybe that's another answer.
Yes,
Yeah.
Carice, and also so the code, this logic that this code talks about so much, is something that came with the universe, and also what came with the universe is every creature is universal right, divine right to protect themselves from force. Every creature has that right, even a bug who is not operating to the capacity that, of course, people are, even knows that it has the right to defend itself from force, whether that force is a raindrop or other bugs messing with it. It knows that it has the right to defend themselves. So no non-white person, no white person should die without putting up a fight. I would suggest, you know, the best thing to do for a non-white person in a dangerous situation is try to get out of that situation immediately. If that is not the case, fight, do whatever one can to defend yourself from deadly force, if possible. That's how I would answer that question as well. And so another question I have is, in a system of white supremacy, who can make the correct judgments about you? You want to answer? Care to try to answer?
According to compensatory logic, counter-racist logic, any person who is not a victim of racism, white supremacy, and or a white supremacist. Wait, yeah, I may have left the part out.
Nope, that's correct. Um, this reminds me of what I've heard a lot of non-whites say. Only God can judge me. A lot of non-white people like to say that, I get it now. Just because everyone's always talking about accountability and we gotta hold this person accountable. We gotta make sure this person gets what they deserve. And I'm like, I'm not too sure how people are held accountable. Besides them saying, "Hey, I'm sorry I did that," or whatever people do when they are needed to be held accountable for stuff. So I think it's best if victims of white supremacy just understand that their situation is one that shouldn't be comparing yourself to other non-whites. And you definitely shouldn't be comparing yourself to white people. Therefore, not judging, attempting to not judge anyone, and of course, understanding that any judgments of you and your actions, I want to say no, are null and void, because unless that person has ended white supremacy, I don't think they can offer much judgment that would be so-called correct. I don't know what a correct judgment is, but this is perhaps why we should leave the judging for whatever created this mess and has allowed this mess to exist, which I believe to be some kind of God type figure known as often called Allah, God, Jesus, and the Creator. So let's save judgment for that entity, and let's no longer entertain judgments about ourselves and what we're trying to do. Because as long as we're trying to end racism, white supremacy, I believe that's one of the best things we can be attempting to do on planet Earth. Despite how successful we are at it, and despite the hurdles that may come our way when trying to solve this problem, because it's a quite daunting problem and we're all very confused about how to solve it. So there may be a lot of disruptions and conflict amongst non-white people when we're all trying to do the same thing.
Just to add to O5 on judging, I think it's important to as well think about like there's resources like the code book or a compensatory counter-racist code and other additional resources that you can read amongst yourselves. And if you would like to hold yourself accountable to whatever you like, that's on you. But I don't think you should like ask others to like, oh, let me do you mind? And no, it's because like you know what your abilities are, and someone holding you accountable is just to say like, hey, are you doing what you want to do? And I think it's important, like 0526 mentioned, is that everyone, I guess, has their own way of like how to produce justice or how to go about that. So it's important that you like, it's okay to have a community around you, but also like trust yourself and what you want to do and what you accomplish. Because if you got the next person as your reference or as what you want to do, then it's almost like I just lost my train of thought. Sorry. It's basically what I'm saying is like you don't need anyone to hold you accountable. You can just do what you want, like what is like think logically and then use this resource that you have, like the compensatory code, to say what you are doing is constructive or not constructive, or can produce justice or not, and etc. I think it's important to like think of those things as a personal walk. And I think another thing too that's very important that Mr. Neely Fuller always mentions on his show is that limit contact, with other victims of racism, white supremacy. And I truly believe that will help you not try to compare yourself with others and what they're doing, and also keep you on the track of, if you are wanting to produce justice as you study, if that makes any sense.
I think it does. Does anyone have anything they like to add, share?
I just wanted to read this last part, well, last of my notes at least, on 162, where it says, do not confuse comfort with justice, balance between people. Do not accept comfort as a substitute for justice, or speak to act as if comfort has the same meaning as justice. Explanation. White supremacists sometimes do things to make many of their victims feel comfortable. They do these things so that their victims will value comfort more than justice. Some of the things or methods used are tasty or sweet food or drinks, thrill producing or relaxing drugs slash chemicals, loud sounds and or soothing sounds, both intended to prevent or hinder constructive thought, speech, and action. Exciting or so-called super thrilling sexual or anti-sexual activities. Exciting games and or so-called sports. Emblems, symbols, and attention-producing body ornaments or garments. The use of words in such a manner as to make truth appear to be false, and to make falsehood appear to be truth. Surroundings or settings that produce the illusion of wealth and or power. This is something that I can't remember. I think it may have been in Time and Energy, but Mr. Williams brought it to my attention that many of us non-white people, or the reason why, I guess for my reason, the reason why racism still exists is that we would rather be comfortable than produce justice. So this part for me was very good, very well said, and I can see how these things would provide comfort for us, but they wouldn't provide justice, because in a lot of these instances somebody is being mistreated. More often than not, the victim participating in it is being mistreated and they don't even realize it. Me myself. So just the whole idea of not confusing comfort with justice. I think that's very important.
I'm so glad. Dan, I do see. Just one thing, I'm so glad that you brought that up. Almost went past it. I think at the very beginning, when I first entered into the book club, we had a discussion about, why are so many non-white people not thinking of this or wanting to produce justice? And we had this conversation and we came down to it because many people are just comfortable, I can't speak for everyone, but some people are comfortable. Like before, I would say being attempted counter-racist, it's like I was comfortable. I had the things that I had and, what the white supremacists gave me, and it made me feel comfortable. And I didn't see like, if I could just ooze my way through life, maybe justice will happen eventually, But obviously, thinking logically and realistically, it won't happen if no one is attempting to produce it. So I'm glad that you brought that up, and I'm so happy on that page. I also went through the different things that could be considered like comfortable for someone. So it had me like make sure I was looking at it and writing down different things about like, what do I like partake in, and what brings comfort to me and what doesn't produce justice. And then it comes back to that conversation about like constructive behavior in order to attempt to produce justice.
I'd like to add on to that. That's also in the 1984 edition, but that section, it's like worded differently from the revised and expanded edition. And so I'll share that. It's on page 94 of the 1984 edition. Okay, it says, do not confuse comfort with justice, reasons, explanations. People who are subject to injustice sometimes may feel comfortable. At other times, they may feel uncomfortable. Persons who practice injustice sometimes may feel comfortable. At other times, they may feel uncomfortable. Okay. Because a person is physically or mentally comfortable or uncomfortable does not necessarily mean that that person is or is not a victim of injustice. Because a person is physically or mentally comfortable or uncomfortable does not necessarily mean that that person is or is not practicing injustice. And then he goes on to give some examples. On a cold, rainy day, a black slave may feel comfortable in the warm kitchen of a white master. On that same day, the white master may feel very uncomfortable riding to a slave auction in an open coach. The black slave, however, though feeling more comfortable than the white master, is nonetheless a victim of injustice. In spite of the relative comfort of the moment, he or she is still a slave to the white master. And that's what he has in the 1984 edition of Do Not Confuse Comfort with Justice.
Yeah, really important. Thanks, Kwaku, Dan, everyone who's who brought up this really important point: comfort over justice. And it's really interesting because for me personally, I'm a person who was once so-called hood rich. I grew up on a very spoiled in my youth, despite also growing up and witnessing people die and many awful things. I was very comfortable for a large majority of my existence until about when I say until I was about 22. That's when my dwelling became quite hell, and dealing with like bug infestations and dealing with like enhanced and poverty, because I was always poor, but the enhanced poverty is okay. I know I'm poor. I know my family is doing quite pitifully and pathetically, but I still had one comfort that I would be able to use, and that comfort was smoking weed. You know, you can smoke weed and just suddenly I'm not as irritable or angry anymore. And suddenly I'm more chill. But that's a comfort I have to get rid of because yeah, it's true that soldiers in the warfield, battlefield, they often do take drugs to help them maintain during war. But it's not constructive for me to use weed as one of my comfort escapes anymore, which is unfortunately because I do like that comfort. Every person likes some comfort, but it's understanding that comfort is not justice, and sometimes comfort can even prevent justice from being put on the table. So I think this part is really important from 166, and it says, do your best to use all so-called constitutional laws, religious laws, legal customs, etc., only in a manner that best helps to result in the replacement of the system of white supremacy, racism with the system of justice, balance between people. White supremacy is not a victimless crime. And this part right here is really important. Blame racist man and racist woman for all the things that your offspring does that is correct and non-constructive, and offer that blame before the white supremacists blame you or others. Guarantee that you and your offspring are and will be people. Well, hold on. Also blame them for not giving you the necessary help to guarantee that you and your offspring are and will be people who have all the qualifications for producing justice, correctness, and peace in all areas of activity. This part right here
Exactly.
is really important. Yep, because the system of white supremacy, our true, or our current parents, are racist man and racist woman. They give us everything that we need, and they're the reason for our entire existence and what we're currently doing on the planet. So it's really important to not blame other Black people, blame other non-whites. If you are in a situation where you're displeased by what a non-white person has said or done, understand, hey, this person is very brain trashed, like me. This person has yet to begin the deniggerization process, and we are just starting to begin the deniggerization process. And I believe the code says that
Bless you.
and I believe the code says that in the system of white supremacy, justice will never be on planet Earth if we aren't. I lost my train of thought, but yeah, that's all I had for this meeting. I'll let people give share what they have to say if they have any more to say, and then we can get into closing comments. If no one has anything else to say, we can just get into closing comments.
My closing. Before reading this chapter, I had thought I really understood what law was. But after reading, I realized I have gained a whole new insight of looking at law, especially when I had been taught that the law was for my benefit, and these laws that were made were to help and protect me. But then I realized none of them were ever made for me to help me or protect me. They were made for the white supremacies to continue to victimize me and other non-white people. And because of that, the victimization continues. So when it says white supremacy is not a victimless crime, it's not. Everything has to be put on their lap because they're the ones who brought this confusion. And they're the ones who have to fix this confusion because they did it. But with us unifying and realizing what they've done to us, then we have to speak up about the injustice to help produce a better way of living, because this is not living. This is existing, but not living, not the way the universal man and woman is supposed to live. So producing justice is something that we have to continually strive to do because it's very much needed. That's all.
For my closing comments, this is really important chapter that has a lot of just gems in it. Like I have experienced very few books where the knowledge I am receiving is just so logical and so simple and so clear that, hey, this is not only this guy is not just talking nonsense. Everything that he's talking about can literally be pointed out and seen. So if you don't believe Mr. Neely Fuller, all we have to do is look around, and majority of stuff that is in this book can be seen in real life. So don't trust race soldiers. Understand that there's no such thing as the police, and don't end up in greater confinement. That's my closing comments.
My closing comments is I had a lot of questions before I read this area that was answered. It just let me see law in a different light. And not to confuse law with justice. So basically, this was a good chapter that, I mean, like an area that made me think more into how and what the roles we have to play to understand, to seek justice.
This section, to summarize, this section helped me understand the role law has in the white supremacy system, and also how non-white people should react or should respond when interacting with the law, which was something great to read for me, because I was like, oh, how do you respond? But a lot of my questions were answered in regards to law and the treatment of law enforcers.
For me, Area 5 law, I learned a lot. I'm still learning every day as I attempt to become that universal man. It seems like the areas as they go on, like O5 said, are very logical. All of it makes sense. It's hard for me to refute any of it. These are things that as I learn, I try to apply almost immediately in my everyday life. And the only thing I'm guilty of is not doing enough to replace white supremacy with justice. I just want to end on that.
And for
Go ahead.
okay, for my closing comments or remarks, I would say the only smart people in greater confinement are the people that plan to be there. Don't fuss, don't fight, don't flee when engaged with a race soldier, and stand by your work in all areas of people activity.
So my closing comment, this chapter was very, how do you say it, enlightening to me. One of the things that it highlighted in this chapter that I've been very interested in learning about lately is a tragic arrangement. And the reason being is because growing up, I always would see like
That's from Area 6. That's not Area 5.
oh, I'm sorry, I'm a page over.
Yeah, but you can continue your thought. I just wanted to add that correction.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I messed up. I do sometimes. But the tragic arrangement, as a child, I always looked at it as these people are, diverse. They're loving each other with the things that I've been taught in the system. I always looked at it as a good thing. And a lot of the time, I guess, or I didn't realize that oftentimes, or what is happening, especially when one of these people, the white male, typically has the money, is that they're removing these people from desperation and taking them in, basically as owned slaves on just a whole different level. So just looking at the dynamics of how this system is set up, and how people look to the white man as the savior, instead of looking within their own communities, funding their own businesses to fight the system, giving up on their own kind, and actually feeling like, well, it seems like a desperation. It shouldn't be on the table so quickly, in my opinion. Not area 5. I feel that I feel like I put too much misunderstood and put too much effort elaborating on the other part. But I guess this legal system that we've grown up in, the system of white supremacy, I have always been taught that the people that that get incarcerated, or the people that find themselves on this roster are criminals, that they've done something wrong, that they've gotten themselves there. And recently, and through this chapter, I've noticed the pattern that, I mean, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter if these people have a criminal record or not. If they're rigged, they're going to be judged that way. And if we start to look at this and look at everything we see and realize that the law is not for us. The law is to benefit the white supremacists and to keep the white supremacists rich. I think that we could continue to decode and change a lot of things if we could just make people aware what their rights are, because most people don't know that. I don't want to get too off topic, but I took a legal course in college, Foundations of the Legal System. And most people in that course, including white people, did not even know as much as they were giving for people to take the citizenship test to live here. So people that live in America really, immigrants often know more than the people that actually live here. So I think we need to take a step back and look at, the values of our system, and especially what we're teaching our children, because that's where they get programmed to, the low self-esteem. I feel like the younger years, it's a subconscious thing when they do it before a certain age. And unfortunately, it manifests when they get older as substance abuse issues, depression, anxiety, so on and so forth. So I think it's very helpful in outlining the fact that the law is not there to protect us for the most part. And that, give me 1 second. And that we have to abide by our own code while following the laws that we would need to follow to keep us, where our families are thriving, our families aren't falling into their trap.
Dang. So I forgot my thought earlier, but it came back, and I want to finish what I was saying earlier. So the word guide mentions the deniggerization process, which is a non-white person just attempting to use truth to produce justice. So when we are born into the system of white supremacy, we are automatically made a nigger, which is whatever you want it to be. It could be something constructive or something destructive, but that's what we are made. And the system of white supremacy will never end unless every Black person begins their deniggerization process, and this process is only completed when the system of white supremacy is no longer on planet Earth. So this is why it's important not to blame any other non-whites, because we all have been put into the system, therefore have been put through the niggerization process. And until we are all deniggerizing, there's going to be a lot of non-white people killing and stealing and raping each other from one another. And there's always going to be white people doing those things as well. But it's important to remember the white people do it because they want to do it and because they have fun doing it. The Black people do it, the non-white people do it because they were trained to do it. They were taught how to do it by the most powerful people on the planet, which is racist man and racist woman. So a lot of work to be done. That's my final closing comment. I'll leave air for anyone who has anything to add. If not, wrap up. Going once. All righty.